Hey guys, Prowl 1701 here, and today we're going to be reviewing a Doctor Who audio story, and it's called The Resurrection Plant by Will Hadcroft. Now, Will actually watches the channel, and he sent me a signed autographed copy of another one of his stories called Dark Contract, which I reviewed and really enjoyed. It's a very good story with a phenomenally good ending. It's like, it did something in the ending I don't know if I've ever seen a Doctor Who story do. And I absolutely loved it. I'm like, hey, it actually worked out like that. That's cool. I really enjoyed that story, and I really appreciated Will sending it. And so I found out he did this story as well, and I purchased a copy of it because I figured, you know what, if the author is willing to send me an autographed copy for free, then I can certainly spend a few bucks to pick up another one of his stories. Funny little side note before I start the review. I kept thinking it was called The Resurrection Planet. I don't know why. Maybe it was a Battlestar Galactica thing in my head, but I kept thinking it was called The Resurrection Planet. I don't think it was till, like, the unboxing of it when I realized it was The Resurrection Plant. I don't know why. I just find that amusing. This one was interesting because my perception of it and my thoughts on it altered radically throughout the course of the story. Now, I didn't like it as much as I did Dark Contract. I still enjoyed it, but at different places. Like, at the beginning of it, the Doctor basically ends up on a planet where when people die, they resurrect in a new body. Almost kind of like how the Cylons resurrect in Battlestar Galactica, the remake, which isn't as good as the original. But they don't respawn in the same bodies, or it's a different body that looks totally different, so you might look totally different, but they can respawn, which is pretty interesting, a neat concept. And I was really enjoying the story to a degree up until the point where there's an accident happens where about 89 people die at once, and something goes wrong with the system because it can't handle that many deaths at once. There was a big accident at the factory and the system overloads, and basically all 89 people respawn in one really mammoth-sized body, which is kind of a gestalt. And gestalts aren't really a thing I'm into. I really had a problem with the story when it got here because that's just not a concept I enjoy. There's an episode of Transformers where Spike's brain gets put in an Autobot body, which is an amalgamation of Autobot parts. I didn't care for that episode. I think it's called Autobot Spike. I don't like that episode. Just gestalt stuff just doesn't really do much for me, which isn't what that Transformers episode is, but similarly, I wasn't impressed. And plus I saw it coming. I seemed to pick up on it faster than the characters in the story did at what was going on, and I kind of groaned because it's just not something I'm into. Now, to be fair to Will, he doesn't try to hide the fact what's going on. It's very obvious. The way he writes the story he's not trying to keep that from you. It's actually very obvious what's going on. We just still realize it before the characters do. Now, don't worry, Will, if you're watching the video, it gets better. I promise it gets better. Stick with me, it gets better. Now, the way Will writes the story, his writing style, his dialogue style, is good throughout the whole story. I have nothing against how he writes the story. It's purely that the subject matter with this gestalt thing is just not something I like. It's just something that I don't get into. And I was having a problem really engaging with the story for a good portion of the story after that concept was introduced, to the point to where I was getting distracted. I was listening to it as I was on the computer, as I was on my phone, which is not good because if you're not careful, then you can miss things and not fully catch what's going on in the story. But I was having a hard time focusing on it, and I ended up stopping. I said, you know, I've got to stop listening to it. I need to take a break. And so I stopped at track 13. Now, on the audio CD, and I do want to point out, this is a narration. This isn't like a full Big Finish audio cast. This is one person narrating the story. And they do have Fraser Hines, of course, who plays Jamie. And I do have to say, Fraser does a good job. He does a really good job with this. He slips back into voicing Jamie easily. His Troughton is pretty good most of the time, too. I know he's voiced Troughton in several stories at one point, I believe. A lot of times his Troughton sounds spot on. Sometimes his Troughton sounds a little more like McCoy to me. Like, sometimes it's a little off and I feel like I'm hearing McCoy. Sometimes it's pretty spot on. But it's fine enough. It doesn't bother me. But he does a really good job with this narration. I did want to point that out. And there are 22 tracks on this. The length of the story is about 22 tracks. I was on track 13 when I took my break. So I guess that'd be maybe a little over halfway. I didn't really time it out. And when I say I took a break, I stepped away from it for several days. I'd say 3 or 4 days that I stepped away from it. I did other stuff. There's been so much going on in Doctor Who in the month of December. I'm recording this in early January, but in the month of December, we had so much going on between the color version of the War Games coming and arriving, Joy to the World coming, all the stuff going on with the Season 7 leak and being officially announced. December was a very busy month for Doctor Who. I had other things to keep me busy. When I got back to this story, again, starting back at about track 13, once I sat down, I started engaging with it. Maybe it's just because the story took an approach I liked, but once I sat back down with it, it was like somebody flipped a light switch. I just clicked with it. The Doctor starts communicating, trying to reach the different personalities in the Gestalt. Again, we're talking 89 people in one very big, brutish, huge body, which can be very violent. Because a lot of the personalities inside, they don't know what's going on. The Doctor talks with one of the doctors who's in the Gestalt. He communicates with her. One of the girls in the story communicates with her brother who is in there. As the Doctor tries to find a way to get everybody, split and back into normal bodies. I did engage with the story. Now, it takes some odd turns I wasn't expecting. Like, you find out there are more Time Lords here. There was a Time Lord expedition sent here that was supposed to observe, but the Time Lords also had one of the other members, one of the non-Time Lord race from Gallifrey. I can't remember what they're called, like the ones that are in the Invasion of Time. One of them was there because they were supposed to be kind of the liaison between the Time Lords and the people indigenous to this planet. But the one person from the other race, like Regis or whatever his name is, I don't think it's Regis. It's probably the other one. I get names mixed up. That person ends up siding more with the other people, and they turn on the Time Lords, and most of the Time Lords get killed except one who gets all the way down to their last regeneration. That's really when you find out about the Time Lords going on. The Doctor sees them regenerate when it's described as the modern Doctor Who regeneration style, the yellow glowing energy. Which, the Doctor does a very good job in this. Keep in mind, this is the second Doctor, of keeping the fact he's a Time Lord secret. He doesn't tell Jamie or Zoe even that he can do that. He knows what's going to happen when the other person's regenerating. When they're like, hey, how do you know about this? He's like, oh, I just a lucky guess. Stuff like that. He really plays it close to his chest because he doesn't want anyone to know he's there. Because the last thing he wants is the Time Lords finding out where he is. So he really keeps that close to his chest. Now, at the end of the story, he does end up managing to save the Gestalt people. Most of them, I don't think it's every single one, I think it's most of them, and getting them back in their individual bodies. If not all of them, then most of them. He does manage to get that fixed. And then he also has to rectify what's going on. One, trying to avoid the Time Lord interference. He manages to convince the one guy who's from Gallifrey but not a member of the Time Lords to work with the last Time Lord, who's on their last regeneration, so has lost their ability to regenerate. And as the Doctor puts it, he's just like you, which technically it's a she at this point on her final regeneration. She's just like you now. And getting them to blend in with the indigenous population, that way if the Time Lords ever show up to find out what happened, they can just be like... So they're not caught up in what's going on. And then the one guy who's not a Time Lord, but from Gallifrey, he realizes that the Doctor is a Time Lord, because he's mentioning all of these people have other names. Like, I think the other surviving Time Lord is the Regent, the Bishop, the Regent, all of that. And he realizes, and Jamie's like, we just call the Doctor the Doctor. And the guy ends up figuring out the Doctor's a Time Lord, and even which one he is. And the Doctor manages, there's some tense moments there between them. The Doctor manages to convince him, not to say that the Doctor's ever been there. Because again, the Doctor at this point is very much in fear of the Time Lords. He does not want them knowing he was here. So he goes through great lengths to not connect the fact that he is a Time Lord, that he is a member of the race of these other people who were there. Which I really, really enjoyed that. It was interesting how the second half of the story, like I said, once I picked back up on it, which would basically be from part of track 13 on, I enjoyed. I was engaged with. I liked it. Took some turns I wasn't expecting, but I enjoyed that watch. So it makes me think the middle, how much of that was the story and how much of that was just me at the time. You know, I don't know, because sometimes you're just not in a proper mood for a story, maybe. I had just finished listening to another Doctor Who story right before I started that one and reviewing it, which was the Paradox Planet, which was really good. I got to finish listening to Legacy of Death soon. And maybe that was it. Maybe I should have taken a breather before I started on it. I still don't think I would have liked this one as much as I did Dark Contract, because I just Dark Contract is so good. It's so good with such a phenomenal ending. I can't praise that one enough. Go listen to Dark Contract. Really good story. Will did a really good job of that one. This one is fine. It's fine. And again, it's not the writing. It's just the fact that I don't really care for the Gestalt stuff. You know, that's just not something I click with. So that's more, I think, a me thing. And me just not connecting with that aspect of the story. I kind of rolled my eyes when I realized what was going on there. But the fact that once I picked the story back up after taking several days away from it, I clicked with it more. And I thought it was an interesting turn when the other Time Lords and the Time Lord lore was kind of brought into it. That was interesting as well. So I ended up, I did end up overall enjoying the story and finding it a good listen. I thought Will wrote it well. I thought Jamie read it well, and I ended up having a good time with it once I stepped back to it. So, the Resurrection Plant, have you read it? If you have, what do you think of it? I wonder if Will's done any more stories. I don't know if he's just done these 2 Doctor Who stories, or if he's done more of them. I'm curious. Will, if you're watching this, let me know if you've done any others. I'm curious. Don't forget to click the like button and the subscribe button as well. I also have a Patreon if you would like to support me on that. There is a link to that down in the description below, where you get access to early videos, exclusive videos. My Sunday videos are exclusive to the Patreon at different tier levels. I think the first 2 Sundays of the week are at the $5 tier and up, and the last 2 Sundays of the week are at the $7.50 tier and up. I also vote on, I do fan polls there. I do polls that the Patreons get to vote on. Check those out. I want to give a shout out to some of my top tier patrons, Colin Coney, Sam Venning, and Unknown289. I appreciate their support, as I do the support of all of my patrons. It's very much appreciated. I also have a P.O. box. If there's anything you would like to send me to look at and review, a link to my Amazon wish list is down there. A link to my Amazon UK wish list is down there as well. I do want to give another shout out to Will for sending me Dark Contract, a nice autographed copy of a Doctor Who story from a Doctor Who writer that watches my channel. That makes my day. I really appreciate Will doing that. Most importantly, thank you for watching.